Today, let's continue our discussion on commercial mortgage and financing. We are going to start with slide number 16, with the title of this slide being Loan Application Package. So let's talk about what kind of document and element that we will need to have into a loan application package when we try to have financing for commercial investment. The first thing we need to fill out the loan application, including the amount that we want to request, and we will need to provide necessary financial statement and credit report, etc. The second element would be the description of the property in terms of location and the title, etc. And then the third one would be the legal aspect of this particular property, including the deed restriction and the legal description of property. Of course, this is very important for the value of the property, and because the property is going to likely serve as collateral. And then, most importantly, this kind of application needs to come with a cash flow estimate. We would need to have a pro forma. The banks are very interested about the income generating property of those commercial applications. Okay, and that's the reason why we often call the commercial property as an income generating property, because income generating capacity is by far the most important aspect for the value of the property. And that's another reason why the income method is the most important method when we try to assess the appraisal value of a commercial property. Along with the appraisal report, we need to be there such that the bank will be able to determine what is the most probable selling price of the property. Next slide. So the underwriting for a commercial mortgage, the lender is going to focus a lot on the income generating capacity. Okay. On the other hand, and we learn about the residential underwriting, where the so-called 3C, right? You still remember the 3C? Okay, that would be the capacity, creditworthiness, and then the collateral. Those are the three things that are most important for the residential underwriting. But for commercial underwriting, the main focus is the income generating capacity. To what extent that you can reasonably believe that the amount of cash flow that this building will be able to bring in the near future. Okay, and therefore the lender will need to perform a so-called due diligence. That would be a set of check, a set of investigation to verify or to qualify all of those estimates associated with the pro forma. And this process will take some time, usually 45 to 90 days, to go through this process before the bank can come back to tell you that whether they want to underwrite and provide this particular loan, and also the terms and the amount of the loan, etc. Next slide. And in addition to the mortgage is the one that they use the complete building as a collateral to obtain financing for a relatively long period of time. Sometimes we call that the permanent loan. I mean the long period of loan. Okay, but before that, there are a variety of other types of loan for commercial development as well. Particularly if we're talking about the construction and the development from just a piece of road land, then there are many different types of loan that need to be used before the use of the perm loan. For example, land acquisition financing. Okay, when a developer purchases a piece of land, and before that they actually would be able to generate some sort of income out of this piece of land. Often the case that there will be no cash flow whatsoever. And so the lending for the land acquisition is particularly risky because you cannot see cash flow right away. It will take some time. You need construction, you need to get permitting from the local government, and those take long period of time. So in the near future, there will be no cash flow. As a result, this kind of financing, this kind of lending is particularly risky. And also there is a land development loan. And once you purchase a piece of land, this land maybe have nothing there, and you may need to, for example, pave the parking lot. You may need to put into the water drainage system. You need to put into the electricity, necessary lighting, etc. So those are the land development loan. Again, when you're working on those kind of infrastructure, usually the income come with commercial property still many years away. So again, land development loan is typically very risky from the lender perspective as well. And then construction loan. Okay, at the stage of making construction loan, it will mean that the developer already been permitted. So here, usually the construction loan is less risky relative to, for example, land acquisition financing, relative to land development loan, etc. Okay, next slide. And here we want to talk about the duration of the debt. Okay, and when you guys maybe have heard about the terminology of so-called term structure. Term structure refers to the phenomena in which the different length of the debt have different level of interest rate. In general, the longer the period of the loan, that would be the longer the maturity, typically the interest rate would be higher. For example, when Uncle Sam borrowed 30 years, that would be the 30 years T bond. And it's going to have a higher interest rate compared with the short-term one, for example, 1 year T-bill rate. Okay, and similar kind of thing occur in for the real estate developer. Real estate developer, when they borrow money, let's say once every 6 months, the interest rate is relatively low. But when you borrow money for entire 10 years, that interest rate usually would be higher. So a lot of developer, a lot of investor try to save financing cost by borrowing short term and then refinance again and again. So every 6 months you do a refinancing with the expectation you would do so for example, the next entire 10 years if your holding horizon is 10 years. By doing so, you will be able to have a lower interest expenditure, but the downside is that from 6 month to the next 6 months, you run into the possibility you may not be able to secure the refinancing down the road. Then you might kaput. Okay, so it's a trade-off. It's a trade-off of a lower interest rate versus the security of a financing. Okay, to what level of security? If you borrow for 10 years, you only need to pay the money in 10 years. Then you have security within this 10 years. Okay, so that's the duration of the debt is often a very important question for developer to ask themselves. That to what extent that you want to make this particular trade-off. And often the case that mainly developer, they are overestimate and overconfident about their ability to obtain refinancing. As a result, they tend to borrow short-term money for a long-term project. Okay, and this is what we refer to the so-called maturity mismatching. Okay. Next slide. This next slide is an example for Broadway partner. This is the classical example of the maturity mismatching. Broadway is a very large office investor in New York, and they use the short-term debt near the top of the market in 2006, 2007. That is just about 2 years before financial crisis, and they use a relatively inexpensive short-term loan to purchase a long-term office building. So it's a maturity mismatching, and after the financial crisis hit, and this investor won't be able to secure refinancing. So what happened? They simply default and then give the key of the building to the lender. So they lost 100% of this entire investment. So this is the danger. This is the danger of maturity mismatching. Next slide. And where the developer or investor will be able to have commercial real estate debt, this kind of loan. They could obtain this kind of loan from the local commercial banks like a TD Bank, thrift institution, life insurance company, mortgage banker, or a commercial mortgage-backed security sponsor, such as like a Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Barclays, etc. Okay, those are the sources of the debt that modern-day real estate investor and developer would be able to secure. Next slide. So this is copy and paste from Wells Fargo's website. As you can see that Wells Fargo Commercial Mortgage Division have this this list of the menu for their commercial mortgage product. The first one is a permanent debt financing. So this is a balloon. Usually it would be the balloon. This is the permanent financing. It could be with or without balloon, but this is a mortgage. Okay. The second one is construction and project finance. Okay, the construction loan, etc. The third one, as you can see, that commercial mortgage-backed security. So they are sponsored. They help the developer to go through this secularization process. Okay. So next slide. Those are kind of activity they engage. In addition to the use of debt, and equity is another important source of the financing. In general, typically for a commercial project, you use 60% to 70% of the debt. Therefore, you need to have 30 to 40% of equity in general. Sometimes when the market is really strong and people might be able to get by with only 20% of equity and 80% of debt. Okay? But most of the time, the developer would need to secure enough of equity so that the project could be undertaken. And equity it can come from either one, direct private investment. What does this mean by direct private investment? Let's assume that Warren Buffett has tons of money. Now Warren Buffett would be able to use his own money and then purchase an office building in Burlington. That's a direct private investment. And another way to secure equity is go through the issuing of the equity security. Okay, for the public trade corporation, that would be initial public offering, IPO, SEO, the sales of the common share. And similarly for equity, for real estate firms, they can do this kind of security issuance as well. And the security issuance could be done either in the private market or it can be done in the public market, such as New York Stock Exchange. Okay, very much like a typical corporation. A small company, local small company, they maybe sell the share privately to local investor. And for a big company, a public trade corporation, okay, like Green Mountain Coffee Roasting Company, they can sell their common share on the New York Stock Exchange. And so for a real estate company, pretty much the same. Next slide. Let's take a look at the direct private investment. Individual can do so. Family can do so. Sometimes institutional investor can do so as well. For example, pension fund, public fund like Alaska Permanent Fund, they invest in some property themselves. Those are the direct private investment. But the majority of direct private investment in the United States, they are owned by the so-called syndicates. A syndicate is a group of the person or legal entity and who come together to carry out a direct real estate investment. And for example, Williston, okay, our freeway on the Williston exit, when we go out there, you have those big box retail stores like Walmart, like Best Buy, those kind of things. That entire big project were undertaken by a syndicate. That's an example of the syndicate ownership. Next slide. Syndicate usually organized as limited partnership (LP) or by structured as a limited liability company (LLC). And the good thing about LP or LLC is that there is a limited liability we call that pass-through. Pass-through means that LLC do not pay corporate income tax, and all of their earning pass on to the end investor directly, and those end investor will need to file those earnings for their personal income tax on before the April 15th. So there's only one taxation at individual level. There will be no taxation at the corporate level. So here we're talking about no double taxation. And in the United States, more than 99% of real estate are being taxed in this particular fashion. The majority of real estate investors do not pay corporate income tax. And so it's a very attractive kind of the tax treatment for investor in the real estate sector. Next slide. So for a syndicate, there is a syndicator. This would be you can think of the general manager of this group of investors. Syndicator is someone who organizes all of the investors, manage the entire activity of this enterprise. Okay, so this syndicator is the go-to person for this particular enterprise. Usually a well-known real estate business person in the local real estate community. Okay, this is the one that you can think of like a quarterback, in charge of the carry out pretty much all of the planning, etc. And syndicator usually is a general partner, okay, or the managing member of the LLC. That means that you can think of very much like a general manager, and develop concept, raise money, acquire property, providing professional management service, and then making decision about disposition, selling of those property. So syndicator is the very important manager of this particular syndicate. Next slide. And under Federal Security Act of 1933-1934, all of real estate syndication are the security. When they are classified federally as security, it just means that they will need to file with SEC. And SEC has responsibility to administrate those entities. So when you form a real estate syndication, okay, and you will need to comply with the federal and the state security law. Next slide. And in addition to the private direct investment, we can issue real estate security in a public market as well. And the classic example would be the real estate investment trust. Real estate investment trust it can be listed on New York Stock Exchange, can also be held privately, okay, and they have become very, very popular in recent decades. In the past 20, 30 years, the size of the REITs have been growing to really, really big. I think globally right now there are a couple hundreds of real estate investment trusts. In the United States, we have roughly about 15 or 20 of them are SP 500 corporation. In other words, they are very, very big. Okay, they are not small company. Many of those REITs are large, big cap company. Next slide. And in terms of their listing status, there could be public list real estate investment trust, okay, and list on New York Stock Exchange. They can be publicly issue their security, but decide not to list in the open stock exchange. That's a public non-listed real estate investment trust. There's another category of the so-called private real estate investment trust. They are not listed in stock exchange. Private means that they do not issue security sell to the investing public. So we have three different types of listing status. Next slide. And REITs, very much like LLC, are so-called pass-through security. They are pass-through just mean that they do not pay corporate income tax. The tax would be only being paid at the individual level. And in order to qualify by IRS as a pass-through, they will need to fulfill certain criteria. The first one, the REITs need to have at least 100 shareholders. They will need to have at least 75% of the asset in real estate, cash, or government security. They will need to have at least 75% of the gross income come from real estate asset. They will need to pay out at least 90% of taxable income as dividend to their shareholder. Okay, so those are the criteria trying to ensure that this set of company are indeed specialized in real estate, and also they are passive in the sense that they pass on the majority of their profit to their shareholder, such that their shareholder will pay their personal income tax, periodically. So that is the status that need to be verified by an IRS, such that the tax at the corporate level could be exempt. Next slide. And benefit of being a REIT, of course, obviously there is a tax benefit. Okay, no corporate income tax need to be paid. And the benefit being a REIT is that you have the option to list your company, say, on stock exchange. By doing so, that you have better access to the capital by raising money, by selling your shares, etc. And also, there is a diversification benefit in the sense that you have a well diversified set of the investor providing you the capital, and then there's a liquidity for your shares. Okay, whenever you have investor want to exit, and they can go to the stock market and sell their shares. Okay, so there's a lot of benefit to structure a real estate company as a REIT. Next slide. And let's look at different type of REITs. Okay, there are basically two major categories. The first category is the so-called equity REITs. The second category is mortgage REITs. The difference between equity REITs and mortgage REITs are their underlying asset. So for equity REITs is that they go to the stock market, for example, raise the money, and they borrow some money, use this combined money to invest, to own, say, a set of offices. They rent out those office space, collecting the rent, and of course there will be costs along the way. And for the money that they make, they pay out at least 90% as dividend to their shareholder. And when they are in this kind of business model, we call that office equity REITs. So it's office REITs. Their underlying asset are those offices. And by the same token, retail REITs are those REITs. They own and invest in retail facility like shopping mall, etc. Industrial REITs are those REITs owning, for example, industrial park, factory, etc. Those are the industrial REITs. And then, of course, they rent those space to those users, those factory. Hotel REITs, think of Hilton, think of Marriott. Okay, a lot of property, their property are REITs. Okay, so they earn money based on those travelers. They live in the hotel. Those are the sources of income. Healthcare, senior housing. Okay, there's a lot of senior housing. They are owned by REITs. And apartment, okay, like multi-family apartments. Okay, so there are a couple of REITs that they own many of those apartments building. Self-storage, okay, and even non-traditional like oil pipeline, and those could be non-traditional, or the cell phone tower. Okay, like American Tower. American Tower is a REIT. American Tower owns many of those cell phone tower. And mortgage REITs, their underlying asset are mortgage. Okay, like agency mortgage, like commercial mortgage, mortgage-backed security, servicing right, etc. There are many mortgage REITs out there. They invest in those mortgage security and right. So this is the end of this set of slides. Next time when we come back, we want to talk about sustainability.